So this is, what are we? Shambhala 101. And Janet is in Halifax at a big international Shambhala something or another happening, big teaching. There's a big teacher giving some teachings and empowerments, and so she's up there, and some other people are up, a couple other people, I think Matthew's up there. Anyway, so I'm here with y'all. I'm betting not everybody knows everybody, because we got some relatively new faces and a sort of brand new face as far as I'm concerned. I don't know you. So I'm Marion.
Gaurav.
Jordan.
Brett.
Natalie.
Leo.
Brad.
Lauren, yeah, sorry.
John.
Jim.
Pat. Thank you. So Janet's been teaching this series for, a couple of months, I guess? And the viewpoint she's been taking is her overview of the class is the Shambhala teachings that occur within a social context, that they arose within a social context, and now we have them in our social context, but also the teachings involve generating a social context, otherwise known as enlightened society. And there's Joel, for y'all that don't know Joel. So we introduced ourselves a minute ago. Yeah. So the core teachings of Shambhala that she's talking about are about how to be a sane human being, which has to do with recognizing what Shambhala calls our basic goodness, or our, gosh, there's so many ways to look at it, our innate wisdom, our worthwhileness as a human being, and then bringing that forth into as we interact with other people and shaping our social setting. In teaching this class, she knows a whole lot more history and sociology than I do. And she's talked about the history of Buddhism and other roots of the Shambhala teachings in great detail, and I cannot and will not even try to summarize those. Then last week she started a discussion about the challenge, hey Molly.
Hi.
Of in the 1950s, the Tibetans, the Chinese communists invading Tibet, and the effect that was having on the partly the social structure, but primarily the monasteries and all the religious structure that was there. And this was when Chogyam Trungpa, who the founder, everybody probably knows by now, is the founder of Shambhala. He was a teenage monk in Dutsitil Monastery during those times, and he had been identified as the way they identify teachers. He had been identified as the 12th in the lineage of Trungpa teachers, and so he was being trained to be the head, the abbot of Dutsitil Monastery. He'd been identified when he was like 13 months old, and moved to. He and his mother moved to live near the monastery, and he lived with her. Going back and forth to the monastery until he was 5, and then he completely moved into the monastery. So he began studying and learning at a very young age. So he was really, really soaked in the Dharma and the Buddhist teachings and practices and leadership, since he was supposed to be the head guy at some point. But then the communists started coming in, and things were changing. Some monasteries were being destroyed. They were targeting the teachers and the lamas, trying to get them to convert to communism, destroying the books and the art in the monasteries. That was coming from China, which was mostly north and east of Tibet, and the monastery that Trumpa was in way east Tibet. So it took him a while to get to where he was. So last week, Janet raised the question to us of what would be our reaction in this situation where everything in your life was at risk of being destroyed. And some of the descriptors that came from our group were frightened, defeated, depressed, feeling like the ground was gone, feeling uncertain. And I was sitting over there, like where Gaurav is, and I was thinking, yeah, but we're talking about our reactions. And so I thought it was important to consider what Trumpa's reaction would be, because he's kind of different from us. Like I said, he had been completely soaked in the Buddhist teachings and discipline and the viewpoint that, well, the first turning teachings are Hinayana teachings of egolessness and emptiness and learning, the Four Noble Truths and non-craving, all those things had really were part of his mind and his life, the way he's approached the world. And not just, for me, most of those are just words, and I'll bring them up sometimes in certain situations, but it's not my way of life. And also, the Mahayana teachings of working for the benefit of all beings, taking care of others, working to help everybody, and respecting all life. So he was coming more from those viewpoints built in. And he didn't talk a whole lot about his reactions to the communists. I mean, emotional reactions, but we can judge from what he did, what he thought of. And then my question for tonight was, okay, in this situation of groundlessness, and he ended up having to leave his monastery and leave Tibet. My question that I had for tonight was, what can we rely on in that groundless situation? Looking for something to hang on to. We can't stand for it to be completely groundless, right? So what he did, he eventually left in 1959 when it got really, really bad. But before that, even when they were, the communists, the Chinese were really starting to destroy things, there were some things that he did to work for the benefit of the people still in China, in Tibet. He received, since he was such a fantastic teacher, he received invitations from several local monasteries around where he was to come do both short and long teachings, and he did. He honored those, even though the communists were hot on his trail. because number one, as a teacher, you don't turn down an invitation to teach. If you're supplicated to teach, you do it. But the second thing was that he was wanting to prepare the people for what they were going to have to face. His teacher at the time, Kempo Gangshar, had been his teacher at the monastery while he was still there. His teacher had met with the people and did some teachings with them and said that Buddhism's forms and rituals would disappear, would be destroyed. So hello, impermanence, okay, it's all going to go away. But the essence of the Buddhist teachings lasts forever. So to hold on to the essence of the teachings is what he was telling the people. And to practice that so that they should cease to do evil, to do what is good, and to purify your mind. So meditate and practice non-harm. And then he told the lamas and monks, this is Kempo Gangshar, he told the lamas and the monks to help and teach lay people. Because before that, it was just the monastics that got all the Dharma education and the teachings about the practices and stuff. So he told to teach the lay people, stressing meditation, because although it maybe looked like it, well, I'm thinking about when I was in Bhutan and people would go around with malas and hand prayer wheels, and so it looked like they were, I don't know what they were doing inside it. It looked like they were practicing, but also it was, I'm not sure how associated with that was with what was going on inside of them. So lay people typically didn't do really deep Buddhist practices. But that they were just, the monks and lamas were to stress to the lay people the values of meditation, loving kindness, and nonviolence. And this especially meant nonviolence to the Chinese. And then Jamgang Khantrul, who was another teacher of Chogyam Trungpa's, his final teaching was, okay, you'll always be a student, always progress along the path. Don't stop, keep learning. But the teacher is within us. We have our wisdom within us. And that's the Shambhala teaching about basic goodness within us, the wisdom within us. So even when everything you rely on externally falls apart, you have your Buddha nature, your basic goodness to lead you. So that was how he was reacting in the values that he was holding up until the time while he was still in Tibet. He was helping the people get ready. Because of the big teachers were leaving. The Dalai Lama left. Eventually Jamgang Khantrul left. And eventually Kempo Gangshar left. So it was just, Trungpa was left at Surmang at his monastery. Hanging on and going around teaching. But behind the scenes, for a couple of 3 years, plans had been being laid to escape because they knew that eventually that was going to have to happen. Two factors led to the tipping point of where Trump had decided to pick up and flee. One was external, and it was that things were getting so close, and they had scouts out seeing where the Chinese soldiers were, and they were getting really close, and so they were getting word, okay, they're knocking on the door. The second one is one that's really fun for me, and some people may not believe it, but I do. Is he in those cultures and other cultures too, very skilled people use divination techniques. And so Trumpa was very skilled at all the teachings, all the writings about him say in a mirror divination technique, which is the ancient Egyptians used these. If you are a fan of the Lord of the Rings, Galadriel had her scrying bowl, her fountain, her bowl mirror that she looked in, and they saw things happening far away. Anyway, this is not an unusual thing to happen, and apparently Trumpa was very skilled, and he had his little mirror, and he could, there was a spirit within it, that a woman that showed him things in symbols, and it told him where to go. Finally it said at this point, okay, it's time to leave and go to this place. I think about that, and I think about, here's my scrying mirror, and it tells me, okay, if I want to go home, I go this direction, and they would think that was pretty miraculous too, okay? So their science is just a little different from our science. Anyway, so with whatever messages he got, external or magical, in the late winter of 1959, he and two of his attendants slipped out in the middle of a storm. And the storm concealed their path for a while. The journey out of Tibet and into India is really amazing. There's a book about it called From Lion's Jaws, that if you want to read an adventure, here's a real adventure. I have, in the newsletter, there's a link right now to a video that was made by the author of this book that follows the path from an air point of view, the way they went.
Is it touch and go?
Quite touch and go.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of, well, they started out with just a few people, but then a lot of other people, everybody was trying to flee. And so they would have other groups join their group, and it's swollen. It ended up, I think, at the most, his party was about 300 people. And how do you feed 300 people? How do you house 300? How do you hide 300 people? Because they couldn't trust any villagers along the way to not give them away. They went through. They started out on the main part of that in, I think, around March, and so they went through the summertime, but then they had winter to go through and the big mountains, and they had rivers to cross, and at some points they had to jettison most of their provisions. For a good long time at the end, the only thing they had to eat was they boiled leather of their shoes and backpacks, and that was their meat. They ran out of water. Older people died. People fell off of mountains. It was really difficult. And that's an understatement, right? They didn't have a map or even a compass. They had to rely on their knowledge of the terrain for a while, and then finally they got a guide. They sent out word and they needed a guide, and a guide came and led them, but sometimes he got lost too. And so, well, anyways, so what did they rely on this journey into the complete unknown? There's the Dharma again. Trungpa did an interesting thing at the beginning, and he told the people, okay, this is going to be a pilgrimage to the birthplace of the Buddha. So we're going to behave like it's a pilgrimage. And then so they would have to follow the Buddhist rules of not killing any animals, even for food, and not killing any people, meaning the communists. And no stealing of food or goods along the way. Avoiding disputes among them, but if conflicts arose, to bring them to him, and he would mediate. And if you're a good Buddhist, you know that really hard things done for a spiritual purpose generate great merit, and so they realized that that was happening, that there was going to be a lot of merit generated by this. So that was the Dharma that led them, and held them together, actually, by that vision. One thing that struck me in reading about it was that even in the face of all the difficulties, how cheerful he remained. And if you've ever seen any of his recordings of any of his teachings, he'll tell people to cheer up. And that doesn't mean be happy, but that means don't sink into depression, be curious, engage in life, whatever. They did find a guide, so they did have a human being to rely on for most of the time. But then when all of that knowledge ran out, they still had his mirror divination that in a lot of the journey he was checking in on every day. So he relied on the Dharma, he relied on people. And he was careful about who, he had discernment about who he relied on, because there were people even within his group that argued with him about which way to take or what their approach should be to the journey. And they certainly had to be careful about trusting villagers and other people along the way. So they had those external means, they had his cheer and encouragement, but they also had the magic. Then 9 months after they started out in earnest, and a year since he left his monastery in January of 1960, he and a few of the remaining travelers, some had had died along the way, some had split off to go in other directions, and they didn't find out for several years what had happened to them. But they arrived in the town of Tuting in eastern India. So they came over the Himalayas, and this little town had an airstrip. And they were flown in an old airplane that was left behind by the British. And they ended up in a refugee camp further in the south and east of India, where then the whole new story generates. But he wrote something that I wanted to quote of when they got in the airplane. These are people that are walking and going on horse and yak back. Ride yaks, horseback. And that is their main mode of transportation. So here's this metal airplane They had seen trucks of the Chinese army, but that was the only mechanical transportation that they had seen. So some of this is Grant McLean's a couple of sentences, and then a few sentences that Chokum Trumper had written. It was the final letting go of everything he had known, but also the gateway to an ocean of fresh experiences and luminous possibilities. He described the utter strangeness of it all, flying high above clouds and mountains. Can you imagine? Never having been up there before. Well, you get up on the mountain and you look down, but you're even above the mountains. Gazing down upon the villages and the footpaths leading up to them, all their usual reference points were gone. They could only gauge their speed by tracking the aircraft's shadow as it dipped and soared over the terrain far below. And so this is what Trumpa had written. We thought about the teachings of impermanence. This was a complete severance of all that had been Tibet, and we were traveling by mechanized transport. As the moments passed, the mountain range was left behind, and the view changed to the misty space of Indian plains stretching out in front of us. So, what of that story could we take to apply to our lives in this time? The challenges that we have, the things falling apart. I mean, it's not so extreme, but
They're pretty, very persistent with what they were doing.
Okay,
A lot of trials and tribulations along the way.
so
They were able to maintain their focus and
stick to it, yeah,
stick to it.
yeah. Whatever it is, have your vision and stick to it.
Closing in like togetherness.
Togetherness, doing it together as a group, you bet. Yeah.
Well, yeah, impermanence and the flip side of the positive side of it, which is change is something new, you know, and novel to you. It's like it's not all bad. It's not all aging and sickness and death.
It's not.
It's improving, you know,
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely the incorporating or letting the teachings about impermanence soak into you, the positive and the, well, is there anything negative about impermanence? You grieve you may grieve what's left, but or what you've lost, but everything changes, and then out of that always comes something new and different. You'd be curious about. That was one thing about Trump, was he was real curious about things. Yeah. What's next? How do we build these boats to go across the river with just little tree saplings and yak hides? But the foundation of all that was practicing meditation and steadying your mind, learning to deal not reactively in emotional situations.
I also think there is an element of fearlessness.
Absolutely.
We're often afraid of the fear of the unknown, or, what if this happens to me? But, countless people, when the worst happens to them, they still are okay.
Okay.
They may explore something that is novel, or they may, find newer things that they never knew they would. So that fearlessness element came from somewhere in him.
Mhm.
And I think that's so critical
Mhm.
because we tend to become very comfortable where we are.
Yeah. And the Buddhist and the Shambhala teachings about fear and fearlessness are is not run away from your fear,
Yeah.
but, step into it. You'll find that it's something completely different from what you thought.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. It's time for meditation. And so you can turn that off, the recording.